Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. It wasn't long ago that from east to west, many were worried we wouldn't know who won on election night. But we did. Interference in our elections has been building for years, and it's not over. In some states, non-U.S. citizens have been allowed to register to vote, and they've been doing so. Foreign money has been used to push state ballot issues. Voting stations have been set up by outside funding groups to drive turnout in specific party zones. Well, plans for any sort of national voter ID have been stymied every time they've been pushed forward. Well, weeks after most elections, we still see the stories about people who've died and who supposedly got to the voting booth anyway. Obviously, somebody stole their name and used it to vote. With all the problems and few resolutions in sight, the former Attorney General of Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli, launched electiontransparency.org, and he's here with us tonight. Thank you for sharing this time with us, sir.
Glad to be with you.
For the first time in a long time, there were no big headlines about election interference last November, but I'm guessing that there were issues that came up. Tell us how you think it went.
Yeah, there were issues that came up, and people started paying attention to this in 2020 because it was so colossally badly run. And I would give America a D grade for our 2020 election. And I think through the work of a lot of us at the Election Transparency Initiative, as well as other organizations who are on the right, where we've never focused on elections before, while the left has for 20 years, we helped improve elections in those 4 years. I'd give us a B minus for how the election ran in 2024. A lot of the reason, Pastor, you didn't hear much about problems in 2024 is because Donald Trump had such a sufficient margin to win that it wasn't close enough anywhere for those differences to matter, unlike in 2020, where you had several states in the 10 to 20,000 vote range with allegations, very credible allegations, that more than that number of people voted who were not appropriately registered.
Well, I'm curious, if you gave us a B minus grade, what would we need to do to get an A plus?
Well, we'd need to have voter ID everywhere. We'd have to have enforceable basis for cleaning non-citizens off the voter rolls. Congress is working on that with the SAVE Act. I expect that that will be voted on in the House in the next month or two. And then we'll see what happens in the Senate. The SAVE Act passed the House previously, but Chuck Schumer, running the Senate, never brought it up for a vote. Presumably John Thune would do that, but that's a presumption on my part. I don't just assume because a Republican is leading the Senate that they're going to do everything the way I would like to see it. So we're still going to need to keep pushing on that front, and we're going to need bipartisan support. The SAVE Act had bipartisan support last time. I think it will have a lot more this time after the 2024 election. I think a lot of Democrats sort of got the memo on not having citizens vote and on protecting our border and so forth. And this is part of that whole effort.
With the enormous number of people here illegally, I would have thought that some voter ID laws would have been approved by now. The president certainly has a very clear idea of how bad the problem is. Listen to his comments about how with no law, the citizen voters suffer.
Well, in California, I have a condition. In California, we want them to have voter ID so the people have a voice, because right now the people don't have a voice because you don't know who's voting, and it's very corrupt.
Ken, in addition to California, has anything changed in any state yet?
Well, yes, in fact. I mean, the reason we've gone from a D to a B minus is we've gotten voter ID in a number of states, including swing states that tend to, at least at the current moment, tend to determine the outcome of presidential races. Some of those have been obtained by referendum. Nevada, while having a very close presidential and Senate race in 2024, had a blowout of a referendum. Over 70% of voters in Nevada supported voter ID in a referendum. So this is broadly popular. This is not vegetarians. Everybody supports voter ID, except a very narrow, loud, left-wing political elite. And those are the people who run for office in our state legislatures. So they don't really reflect the will of the people in this respect, which is why when you get it on the ballot, you have such a blowout election, because when everybody can express themselves on it, over 70% in this case of Nevadans, but that's consistent with the number all over the country, support voter ID. And why not? I mean, we're one of the only countries in the first world that doesn't require voter ID for everyone to vote.
Well, I'd like to get your opinion on how the president is doing with his full-scale effort to find and evict people who are here illegally. Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, and Pete Hegseth, they're all involved. From what I've seen, it's a strong start. Do you agree?
It's a very strong start. And let's just zero in on Pete Hegseth as an example. If you don't even have to just compare this to Joe Biden's term, for which this is night and day. Even the first Trump term, no defense secretary ever visited the border. And no defense secretary said what Pete Hegseth said, that anything this president wants to defend this border, the Department of Defense is going to snap to. That is not what happened in even the Trump Department of Defense in his first term. They resisted. And of course, they did nothing to stop the flow of illegals into our country in the first entire Trump term. And President Trump promised that that would change in his second term, and it has. It already has. Now I'm waiting to see, what are these members, what are these Marines, what are these soldiers doing at the border? Are they actually turning people away? That would be useful. It doesn't do any good for them to back up Border Patrol. We've heard that before from Joe Biden, from the first term of Donald Trump. But so far, that's outstanding. And Marco Rubio's Secretary of State. I'm not sure any Secretary of State in Trump's first term even went to a country south of the United States in the Western Hemisphere. And if they did, they sure as heck didn't mention immigration issues. And Marco Rubio, right off the bat, has started doing that. He's been aggressive about it. That represents a whole new world for America, positioning this as a high priority foreign policy issue.
Can you help us understand how foreign money is used to tilt our elections?
Sure. So most states they have a ban on foreign funding of candidates, but what ends up happening, and this focuses on a particular Swiss billionaire who's a radical left-winger in the Soros and World Economic Forum sort of genre, he's been pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a very polarized referendum, like abortion referenda that are on state ballots, for example. Well, if you're turning out extreme pro-abortionists in Ohio, you're turning out Democrats. And so it's used, foreign funding is used supposedly in the referendum, and I don't allege that it isn't used in the referendum, but it has the result of affecting all the other elections on the ballot. And it's being used strategically by left-wingers from around the world to fund and to skew the outcomes of American elections.
Well, in a moment, we'll discuss how you've managed to get national partners in this mission. In the meantime, please jump in with your thoughts by writing me an email and sending it to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be right back. We're back now with the head of electiontransparency.org, Ken Cuccinelli. A group by the name of American Principles Project has joined your efforts. They focus on family issues, religious liberty, and now election laws as well. What specifics are they looking for?
Yeah, we partner with APP, as we refer to it, American Principles Project, and its leader, Terry Schilling. They have been the leading organization in fighting successfully the transgender agenda, and they know their members and their supporters want to know that their efforts in that space are going to count, and to do that, they know they need fair elections. So APP doesn't ignore the election issue. They partner with us at the grassroots level. We talk to their members all the time and rouse them out on election issues in their home states. So that's how we partner with them. We do the same with other groups like Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life, and we work with election integrity groups across the right side of the spectrum. And I have to tell you, as someone who's worked at the national level for a decade and a half, I have never seen so much cooperation for such a long time among all the groups right of center. I've never seen it on any other issue other than what I've seen in the last 4 years on elections. And it's important for people watching you and I to realize that just because Donald Trump won in 2024 doesn't mean we now have fixed our elections. We have a lot more work to do. We have voter ID to get all over the country. We have 22 more states to get rid of Zuckerbucks in. We have an awful lot of transparency we need to achieve so every one of you can see what happens in your elections and you can decide for yourself whether you think it ran well. I think that's why we're named Election Transparency Initiative, because we believe transparency provides confidence in the outcome of the election, no matter who wins.
Do you have an explanation why there was this heightened sense of cooperation this time?
Well, I think a lot of other, we just talked about American Principles Project. I mentioned Susan B. Anthony as well. The members of all of these groups are saying, look, I care about fill in the blank issue. If you belong to the NRA, you want to protect gun rights, and so on. If you belong to SBA, you want to protect life, and so forth. But they all know that battle takes place in the election arena, the election marketplace. And if that arena is rigged against us, then there's no point to them putting their time and money into supporting these efforts. So it goes along with, we can call it a prerequisite to dealing with any other issue, is we have to know that we have sufficiently clean elections that we can win on our issues, that the marketplace of ideas that we call the political arena is sufficiently fair that we can win when we put up good candidates, run good campaigns, and sell our ideas convincingly, sincerely, and credibly to the American people.
There's been a big push for early voting and even expanded mail-in and absentee voting. Another one of the president's appointments made clear that she's going to take this on. Listen to the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi.
No one from either side of the aisle should want there to be any issues with election integrity in our country. We should all want our elections to be free and fair, and the rules and the laws to be followed.
Do the officials from both sides of the aisle agree with her?
They wouldn't admit that they don't, but it's hard to explain opposing something like voter ID any other way other than that you're willing to accept a much higher chance of fraud. And, the Jimmy Carter, just passed away, God rest his soul. The Jim Baker Commission back in 2005, bipartisan, a lot of luminaries, they found that mail-in voting was far and away the most vulnerable to fraud. That has not changed. In fact, it's probably gotten worse because our post office is now performing worse and worse. And the more people rely on mail for voting, the more likely their vote is never going to arrive and never be counted. And there are 8 states right now that do only mail-in voting. They're all in the West. And that is a terrible, terrible idea. 1,000 Utah votes weren't counted because they weren't dated by the particular post office in question. They went out of the state to Las Vegas and then came back to Utah. And that's the post office's business. That's just how they handle mail in that part of Utah. But those people, because they didn't have the postmark date and their ballots didn't arrive in time, their votes are gone. That's 1,000 votes gone. Well, Utah is proposing legislation to stop that by mailing out ballots, but requiring people to bring them in person and show a voter ID. So they're looking to solve 2 problems at once there, the voter identification problem and to solve the insecurity, really, of mail-in ballots.
Well, just one more quick question. On security issues, the police always say, if you see something, say something.
Right.
Should that practice also be used for voter integrity?
It absolutely should. And different states, frankly, have a different level of aggressiveness about dealing with election issues. Harmeet Dillon is going to be Donald Trump's voting rights section chief. She is an extremely experienced and aggressive and intelligent lady. She knows this space like the back of her hand. And so even at the federal level, you're going to get intelligent, meaningful enforcement that's consistent with what you heard Pam Bondi testify to right there. It isn't to tilt the playing field, it's to clean the playing field. And I look forward to Harmeet Dillon getting there. And as more and more states, frankly, get more aggressive in enforcing their own election laws, we get better outcomes. And more, I can tell you as a former attorney general, more people are deterred from doing wrong when they know they may be caught. It's the likelihood of being caught that really changes behavior. And with transparency, that likelihood is going up and up and up. And now we need just more transparency in more states. And that's what we're going to keep working on at electiontransparency.org. And people are welcome to join us and follow what we're doing and participate in it.
Well, Ken Cuccinelli, thank you for your hard work on this important issue and for joining us to help us understand.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you. God bless.
Without elections we can trust, our democracy will ultimately fail. Hope you'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
In a moment, I'll have some thoughts of my own on how we can help. I think back to the election in November. I can't help but think that the result was an expression of God's grace and mercy towards all of us. God heard the prayers of His people through the heartland of our nation from one coast to the other. People who still subscribe to a biblical worldview prayed and voted accordingly. We haven't seen that in a long time. In many ways, we're living in the fruit of that. We're in a season of rapid change with policies that seem to better reflect a biblical worldview on key issues shaping our culture. That's why we have to continue efforts to ensure voter and election integrity. One fraudulent vote, one stolen vote can nullify one legitimate vote of a praying Christian who might vote according to a biblical worldview. Well, what about our own lives? We have an assignment to stand for the truth. It's not just the politicians that need to stand for the right thing. God's people need to do that, to search for the truth, because the solution to society's ills ultimately are not political, they're spiritual. You see, God's truth carries a weight that can overcome the opinion of God's adversaries. It doesn't even require a majority. There is an authority in the truth of God. So we have to be determined to be champions of the truth, to not be deceitful or deceptive. We have to practice the truth, put it on, wear it, live with it, even when it's awkward and uncomfortable. If we'll determine to tell the truth about what we believe, that we believe in Jesus, that we believe that there's an authority in His Word, that we want to serve Him with our lives, that our hope is in Him, then we have far more reasons for hope than despair, I promise. When we return, I'm going to read some of your emails. Thank you for sharing your emails with us. We always look forward to reading your opinions. Sherry from Maine wrote, "Thank you for your show. There's a new sense of hope across our nation, and it's encouraging." I agree, Sherry. It feels like we've been given a breath of fresh air and perhaps a new future. Just a reminder, we can't leave all the change to the politicians. We've got to be change agents in our homes, around our kitchen tables, around our holiday tables, in our congregations. We're going to have the courage to stand up for the truth. Washington can't fix this mess. They didn't create it all. Trudy C. from French Settlement, Louisiana wrote, "I started watching your show in your church a few weeks ago. News, always informative, and love your down-to-earth preaching of God's Word. What a blessing you are." Well, Trudy, you're kind. Tell your friends. If they miss the program when it's live, you can catch the program every evening. They're posted on YouTube. You can just go to alanjackson.com. You get a direct link there so you can watch the programs at your leisure when you want to. Tell a friend, share the news. It'll help us stay on the air and hopefully spread the message. Be sure and send your emails to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. And from all of us here in Nashville, thank you for joining us tonight. You have a wonderful evening.